morning, Austin. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your guest host, Jeff Dee, and this is the Atheist Experience, brought to you by the atheist community of Austin. It's June 27th. We're live, and I have a mic problem. Nobody can hear me. Let's try that again. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your guest host, Jeff Dee. This is the Atheist Experience, brought to you by the atheist community of Austin. It's June 27th. We're live, and now you can actually hear me. Ray Blevins is on vacation. He'll be back in this chair in August. Today's guest co-host is Manda.
Hi.
And today's guest is David Bagley. And our topic today is church-state separation. This is a part of the show where we do news from the group. We meet every Sunday at the Hot Jumbo Bagelry on the corner of 5th and Lavaca. And we meet right after the show. We'll be running a tape next week because it's the 4th of July. We won't be live. And instead of our bagel shop meeting, we'll be hosting a lecture by UT Professor Paul Wilson at the Furs Cafeteria at North Cross Mall at 11 a.m. Just to introduce our topic today, our guest David brought in this picture. Can we get a close-up on this? This is Pastor Jack Harvey of Killeen.
Tabernacle Baptist Church.
Tabernacle Baptist Church. And he's got a cross there, and he's wearing a nice patriotic tie. That's church-state connection there. That's a little creepy. So, sorry, we're getting talk out there among the cameramen. So, David.
Yes.
What would you like to talk about today?
Well, actually, what I came here to talk about wasn't as much about direct church-state separations. Which camera am I on? This one?
You'll be on, you can tell by the monitor, and it's the camera with the light on.
Okay, great. Actually, what I came here today to talk about more than anything was about the sourcing. We hear a lot of things, and one of the fun things I like is quotes. Francis Bacon in 1620 made an interesting quote about how people make decisions. For what a man rather were true, he more readily believes. Therefore he rejects difficult things from impatience of research, sober things because they narrow hope, the deeper things of nature from superstition, the light of experience from arrogance and pride, things not commonly believed out of deference to the opinion of the vulgar, numberless and short of the ways and sometimes imperceptible in which the affections color and infect the understanding. In other words, peer review. And, okay, here we go. Anyway, so what it comes down to is that what do you use as a source and how do you get your information about church-state separation? One of the biggest authors about church-state separation happens to be David Barton, these are two of his famous books. One is The Myth of Separation, and this is America to Pray or Not to Pray. Well, the interesting thing about both these books is that somehow the man does a lot of traveling and talking to religious groups and whatever to really drum up support for them. But he never will take on an audience that disagrees with him. So he constantly talks about this process of church-state separation. And the best way to do it is actually use his book as a format for it. You take a look at the back of it. He says on here, start off with talking about our presidents and what they believed or didn't believe about church-state separation. He gives a quote from John Quincy Adams that supposedly supports the church and state being mixed. He says that the birthday of the nation is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior and forms a leading event in the process of gospel dispensation, but then gives this long break, which is indicated by dots, and then says the Declaration of Independence, etc., laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity. But he doesn't tell you where the document comes from. And one of the interesting things, if you go back and do a little research, and you get John Quincy Adams' words himself, he says, 13 governments of the original states, thus founded on natural authority of the people alone, without a pretense of miracle or mystery, which are destined to spread over the northern part of the whole quarter of the globe, are a great point gained in the favor of the rights of mankind.
And that's the part that was in the ...
That was part of the stuff that he never tells you in his book. So my point today is check your sources. And when you take a look under the thing here, on the whiteboard here today, you'll see a lot of different books. And as we talk and go on, I'll be referring to different ones and picking up court cases and things to show you that this is a lot of work to get this right and to get your information as clear as possible. One of the interesting things he brought was John Jay. John Jay is one of the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Really interesting character if you get to know him. John Jay said, "Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers. It is the duty of our Christian nation," again dots in the middle of it, "to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." Well, the problem with John Jay is he was only in the Supreme Court for 7 years. Then he went back to New York to be the governor. And then he had this real neat idea. Let's drive all the Catholics who aren't good Christians out of New York State. I mean, excuse me, first of all, the opinion of one justice that has not been carried on throughout judicial history, and the opinion of a bigot who tries to drive people out of their place of residence because they don't like their religion, is not very important to me. And it's not attacking the man, it's attacking his opinion. This was John Jay. He was an anti-Catholic bigot. Then he goes and quotes a French historian, Alexis de Tocqueville. Well, that's nice. Alexis de Tocqueville traveled for a while in the United States, but did he really live in this country and know all the history and the long history of what's gone on as far as religion and everything else? Has he known about all the killing? You know, what people forget when they talk about church-state separation is that Adams, Jefferson, and all of these men were intimately familiar with the thumbscrew and the rack. Now, in case you don't know what the thumbscrew and the rack is, take a pair of pliers and squeeze your thumb sometime. See how it feels. Well, in order to persuade people that this religion or that was right, they take these little things and they screw it down and press, and they pour boiling oil over your feet and down your throat, and they dunk you in water and all. And things like that were done in this country. And until the late 1800s, the Catholic Inquisition was still in existence. So every one of these people, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, were aware of that. And that's where the backdrop of church-state separation comes from. If you take a look at Madison as a primary example, Madison studied at Princeton University, graduated to become a minister, went back to his home state of Virginia, and immediately started writing against church-state persecution. People put in prison just for their thoughts. So when we talk about church-state separation, let's include the double side of the backdrop. Yes, people came over from the Puritans, the Huguenots, and others because they were persecuted in their homelands.
Right.
But they immediately persecuted when they arrived here. So they did the same thing. And then the majority of the population that came here, there were originally 13 colonies. And you get this nice statement that the 13 colonies were formed by people for religious reasons. Anyone that studies history and studies the Constitution, pick up what was the 3/5 Compromise about.
Never heard of it.
In the Constitution.
Okay.
The 3/5 Compromise was about the fact that from the Virginias on down, there was such a heavy population of slaves. In places like the Carolinas, it was almost 2-to-1. In some places, 3-to-1 in certain counties. Slaves to whites.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so as a black man was only worth 3/5 of a person but couldn't vote because they were the majority of population. And then you take colonies like the Carolinas and the Virginias and others, and what had happened was that a large part of the people that came over and lived in that colonies were actually the sons of indentured servants or indentured servants themselves who came over to work the lands of the people who came over first. So they didn't come over here for religious freedom, they came over here because they wanted to eat. They were starving a large part of the people were starving in Europe. Remember, they were having a series of wars in Europe, and places were being destroyed one after the other, and they were coming over in successive waves. And a large part of it was economic, like the Pennsylvania Dutch. It was an economic thing.
So do you think people take the story of like the Pilgrims and just
blow
expand that to include everybody who ever came over to the United States, when in fact it was just some of the people?
Just a small minority population. In fact, even in the Massachusetts Bay colonies, the interesting thing was that they almost starved the first year or so they were there. And the only reason they prospered was they had a high level of indentured servants. And eventually they had what they called the halfway compromise. Because of all the children and all the people that weren't part of the church, they had to have a compromise to let the people join the church, but not fully. So nowhere was any part of the colonies ever strictly established for the purpose of religion. That's been one of the great myths of United States history.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm always struck when we have guests on who bring books written by creationists or by people against church-state separation. Atheists read those books. We read the things, listen to the things that are being said by those who we disagree with. And what struck me on a recent trip back to visit my parents, who are both Methodist ministers, was that they have a huge library full of Christian books, not a single book talking about atheism, not a single book representing the other side. And there's a serious imbalance here. And when we have lecturers like this David Barton going around talking to Christians who are already predisposed to believe what they're about to say, and presenting them this limited, skewed, biased view of history, it's no big surprise that you get Christians thinking that, well, this is all clear-cut and cut and dried. And it's not, because there are all kinds of other books that aren't, and all kinds of details that are being glossed over by these lecturers, and that's, you've got to look at both sides and see what is really going on. Do you have anything that shows specifically, that illustrates that in fact we have a separation of church and state? Can we get a quick?
Well, a real quick example of it is this. I'm going to put a couple of dates up here.
Okay.
All right. 1776, we all know July 4th. But from 1769 to 1785, well, it's hard to see maybe, but from those dates, something occurred that really illustrates church-state separation in the United States.
Okay.
In 1769, Virginia took the Church of England out of its establishment. Let me get my dates here. I am not going to make a fool out of myself by getting my dates wrong. That is one thing I love to do, is have my dates right. All right. 1769, Virginia disestablished the Church of England. So they had no church. Now, what was interesting to remember about Virginia that makes Virginia so important is Washington, Madison, Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and several of the major luminaries that really wrote the Constitution and established certain precepts lived within 30 or 40 miles of each other in this state. So this debate that started here over paying for churches with tax dollars had all the major players involved. It is the only state that had that going on. Well, in 1777, 1778, they still had no taxes for the Church of England, both legislative sessions. Then in 1779, they put forth the tax was repealed completely. So, no Church of England.
It wasn't repealed completely until 79. What was going on in the interim?
Well, the law was still allowed technically for a general bill of assessment.
They just weren't collecting it.
They just weren't collecting it.
Okay.
So they repealed it in 1779. Now, Patrick Henry, who was an anti-constitutionalist, who did not want the Constitution, anti-federalist, in 1779 aided in the introduction of two bills. Okay. Now, the two bills are introduced. One was for the assessment, and two was for religious freedom. Now, I realize it's hard to read, but the point here is the first bill was for an assessment for all Christian churches, teachers, gospels, assemblies, whatever, a small tax. And the second was a Jefferson's bill for religious freedom. So here we had the first church-state battle fully set up in place. Now, 1784 to 1785 is what's so interesting. Patrick Henry led the attack to get the bill passed and almost got it through in almost at 1784.
That was the bill to instate a tax
for religion.
For religion, okay.
Well, there was such an uproar from all of the provinces that Madison's Memorial and Remonstrance was given out, which is which itself is very interesting. I had a copy of it here. Madison's Memorial and Remonstrance was given out, in which he said Because religion be exempt from the society at large, still less can it be subject to that of legislative body. The preservation of a free government requires not merely that the metes and bounds which separate each department of power be invariably maintained, but more especially that neither of them be suffered to overleap the great barrier which defends the rights of the people. The rulers who are guilty of such an encroachment exceed the commission from which they derive their authority and are tyrants. The people who submit to it are governed by laws neither made by themselves or by an authority derived from them and are slaves. He clearly stated the separation of church and state in a lot bigger language. Well, what happened was Madison was actually in the legislature, and he actually had he led a political battle where what they did was they put Patrick Henry in as governor of the legislature, which meant that he had no power in the legislature. The governor was strictly pro forma, basically.
Okay.
So what happened was Jefferson's Bill for Religious Freedom passed, which held that the state would not fund religion, that each person's rights were separate, that the church and state would not be joined.
Now, what was going on in England at this time with the Church of England, which had been hand in hand with the king?
Well, that was one reason the Church of England was disestablished in most of the colonies by then, was because that the Church of England was a royalist party.
Right.
So this is the first example of when the legislature and a preeminent legislature, where the people that actually, remember, the people that actually wrote the majority of the Constitution, Madison, Jefferson, and the ones who really were heavily involved in putting, remember that Madison is the one that put in started writing the first 10 Bill of Rights. And he was a major writer and author. And he was one that said that we should have a separation. I think we have somebody calling us.
We have a call. Do you want to take this now?
Yeah, let's take it.
Okay. Hello, Nina?
Hi. I just wanted you to know that my husband is atheist, and I'm not. I kind of believe in God, and he doesn't. And he watches your show like every day. He's here, but today he's not, and that's an exception. And I just wanted you to know that he is one of the most wonderful person I've ever met, and he is kind of very rational and very caring and gentle, and I think that's because he doesn't believe in God, and I just appreciate him so much, and I hope you all are like him too.
Well, we try to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do you watch our show with him?
Yeah, I do. I do sometimes, and I like you guys. And although I believe in God, but I watch your show, and what he talks about, it makes so much sense, and I'm kind of hanging in between right now. Yeah. Between God and atheists, and I just wanted you to know that we like your show, and we watch it every day, and thank you for a wonderful program.
Thanks for watching, and we're not trying to pressure anybody to not believe in God. If you believe in God, I mean, that's the way you believe, and but if you're thinking, if you're continuing to think about whether what you believe is...
My husband agrees with you 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, he does. So thank you for a wonderful show, and God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. I always kind of think that if there turns out to be a God, which we think is so unlikely that we don't actively believe it, but if there turned out to be a God, I don't see how we could possibly be offended by us human beings using our brains.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I guess one of the points you wanted to make today was that the multiplicity of sources. David Barton is a classic. Well, the interesting thing about David Barton is he is now a high muckety-muck in the state Democratic Party and the state Republican Party. He is actually taking lead in formulating policy.
Just a moment. We've got a problem. What's the problem?
To release the funds.
It's released.
Okay.
Yep.
If you don't release the phone, they can't go into the light. And
Sorry.
haunt you.
Okay.
It's my first time operating the phones, folks. So I'm going to be a little shaky at first. Sorry about that.
Well, what's the interesting thing about David Barton and his work is that he is now a leader in the state Republican Party. He is formulating policy, he's talking to leaders, and his word is being taken as gospel by a lot of people.
Which state are we talking about?
Texas.
Texas.
So David Barton is up there. So this person we're talking about is interesting. One of David Barton's greatest critics, and I think you'll find this interesting, has anyone ever heard of a university called Baylor in Waco?
Yeah.
Or the Baptist Joint Committee on Public Affairs?
Hadn't heard of that.
Well, this is the critique of David Barton's America's Godly Heritage, which comes off their website. And the booklet explains some of the problems with Mr. Barton's scholarship. Well, see, one of the things is Mr. Barton is not a historian. And he doesn't give a vitae. It says wherever he is and what his qualifications are and what he does, so we have no idea what he's supposed to be. But they say, one, Barton's claim that 52 of the 55 signers were Orthodox Christians. Well, they blow that out of the way with several comments. Barton quotes at length from George Washington's farewell address, extolling the salutary effect that religion has on politics and government. Well, that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of pro forma words in government that really are not indicative. But Washington also said, if I could conceive that the general government might ever be so administered as to render the liberty of conscience insecure, I beg you will be persuaded that no one will be more zealous than myself to establish effectual barriers against the horrors of spiritual tyranny and every species of religious persecution. Every man conduct himself as a good citizen and be accountable to God alone for his religious opinions ought to be protected in worshiping the deity according to the dictates of his own conscience. And in some of his other correspondence, one of his, he had a job being done on his property. And they asked, well, who do you want working? He said, I don't care who works as long as they do the job, even atheist, Muslim, whatever. We got Sissy.
Okay, let's take another call. Hi, Sissy.
Yes.
Morning.
I have a question for you guys. I consider myself to be a Christian woman. I love Jesus. I love God. I have nothing against people believing in anything or not believing in anything. But I did have a question.
Sure.
I was just wondering what made you guys, or were y'all brought up atheists? Or did at some point in your life something happen and you just decided, hey, there's not a God?
We get this question a lot, and we'll each respond in turn. Dave, you want to take this first?
I became an atheist because I could read and think. Simply that.
Okay.
And the fact is, when you really sit down and read the Bible as a book, and you take a look at its obvious problems, and its obvious falsehoods, and its obvious mistakes, you realize that it's not the Word of God, it's the word of men disguised as the Word of God.
Okay.
And I come from a very religious home. My parents met as missionaries in Cuba before Castro. And then my mom, when I was growing up, was a teacher, and my father was a businessman. And as soon as my brothers and I were out of the house, they were signed up at seminary, taken classes, and got ordained as Methodist ministers. But while all that was going on, and I was out of the house and free to think for myself, I had some questions in my mind about religious matters and about the question of God's existence, and I was always afraid to address those questions, to think them through, because I got this sense that I inherited from my upbringing that somehow asking questions like that was being cruel or unfair or unkind or mean to God. And one day it occurred to me that any God who would be upset with me for following through and using the brain that he was supposed to have given me to examine these issues, clearly and dispassionately, any God that would be upset with that would be a God I couldn't honorably worship in the first place. I would consider a being like that to be a tyrant. And that freed me up to start thinking about, is there really any evidence? And
Right.
what I concluded is that there's not. Manda?
I had a split in my family. There were many, many debates. I got to hear them all. My mother was devout Christian. My father was an atheist. He was always rebellious, and his family kind of poo-pooed what he said because they assumed that he was just being an atheist for the sake of rebellion.
Right.
But what he said made a lot of sense. So I was left on my own, and asking both of my parents, I am very thankful that they both said, go and find out. Think it through. You have to decide. It's your soul. You have to find what will lead to you leading a happy life, a life that justifies your existence. And I would read a lot of books about both religion, about atheism, about ethics, and rationalism. The Christian books I read were very complicated. They had very, very lengthy debates. And on the surface, they always made a certain amount of sense. But when I tried to get to the root of the Christian books, they came down to just believe. And that wasn't good enough for me. Whereas when I read things about ethics, it came down to this is human psychology, this is what we've seen people do, this is what has worked, and I decided to choose that. Like Jeff, I couldn't find enough justification to believe in God, and I couldn't just sit and turn my brain off.
Right.
My grandmother's very conservative. My grandmother said you should pray, and I had read in another thing that when you repeat an idea to yourself, or when somebody else repeats an idea to you, the act of repetition is brainwashing.
Right.
And I think of prayer as self-brainwashing. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea of just pray for the answer was the only one that I didn't pursue.
Yeah, I was brought up with a very, very devout Catholic family. I mean, my mother had just a tremendous amount of faith. And I'd always wondered, I had questions growing up myself, and I'm 36 now, and I've got what I think is just a great relationship with God. I've got, you know, a great relationship with Jesus. And I've listened to you guys, and I've heard you say things that don't make sense in your head. And I guess with me, I'm just a heart person. It's things that make sense in my heart, and what feels good, I guess, are just real, real deep inside. Yeah. And I was just curious, that's all. I mean, I just don't want to get up here and start preaching to you guys or say y'all are doing it the wrong way, because, I mean, nobody knows who's doing it the wrong way or the right way. All we can do it is whatever way we feel comfortable with. So,
well, you know, of course, we don't necessarily agree with that.
Right.
Because if we did, I mean, I think if you asked atheists, most of them would say, yeah, we can see how belief in a loving, cosmic, eternal being would be very fulfilling. And we can see the emotional attraction. But the difference, I guess, with atheists is that if there isn't such a God, and that makes the world a slightly less wonderful place to be, well, that is still the place that it is. And the thing that we want to do is look at how things really are and deal with that.
Right. I guess, like, it gets back to this for me is, I guess, you know, obviously not believing in God is what makes you guys happy, and I find a tremendous amount of happiness.
But like I was just trying to explain to you, we don't do it for happiness. Our motive is wanting to know what's really going on.
Right.
And we're willing to sacrifice a little bit of happiness for that.
Okay.
Because
I guess that's the difference there.
Yeah.
I choose to be happy, I suppose.
Well, you know, we work at it too, but we want the happiness that we can legitimately earn.
You don't want a happiness that you can just feel and not even have to question?
Yeah, there was a great quote from Dick Cavett on this subject. Dick Cavett is an atheist, and he said he could see how it would be very the words he used. Okay, I'll paraphrase. He could see how it would make life seem nicer and make everything seem like it made more sense if he just gave in and decided to believe. But for him, the fact that it was that easy, the fact that he could change the way the world looked to him by just deciding to go ahead and believe, made it seem to him unworthy make that seem like an unworthy act. It was just too. He felt like he had to earn his happiness instead of having it handed to him on a platter. But anyway,
yeah.
we don't need to debate. You are free, of course, to believe the way you want, and we have no problem with that. And we love when Christians like you call in. You ask fair questions, and we respond. You know, and we've got a dialogue here, and that's great. And if the world was full of Christians like you, boy, we'd be much happier.
Well, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say good luck to you guys, and thanks for letting me say my piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Go on, Mary.
Okay, let me release.
Ooh, that's a 3.
And Mary on 2.
Good morning.
Morning, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
I just had to call. It's a whole new crew except for you, Jeff. What happened to Mr. Blevins?
Ray's taking a month off.
Oh, but he'll be back, right?
He will be back.
Oh, the loss of Joe Zamecki was something. But now to lose him too, well, I guess life changes and things go on.
Yeah, well, Ray has been a real soldier doing this show for the last 2 years, I think it is.
Right.
And he just wanted a break.
Baldy at least once every Sunday.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I wanted to talk about is, I guess y'all are talking about why you're atheist.
Well, the last caller asked us that. The topic of the show is actually
Oh.
church-state separation.
I want to talk about why I am.
Okay.
Because of racism. When I realized how wrong racism was, it made me question everything else, and pretty soon you get to the big boss, and you go, hey, why are you giving me orders? What makes you smart enough to tell me what to do? And I figured out from reading the book that he isn't smarter than I am, and he's got no right to tell me. Even if he does exist, he's got no right to tell me what to do. And it just comes from racism. When you start to question something that big, people have developed societies based on racism, and they were wrong. And it's going to be really tough when they find out, all of the racists find out how wrong they really are. It's going to be even worse when all the religious people realize how wrong they are. Okay? It's going to be hard to live with if you're an atheist.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for calling, Mary.
Bye.
You got nothing to add to that.
3.
And I can release that. And we go to Carla on 3. Morning, Carla.
Hi. I have 2 quick questions.
All right.
One is, this world is so great and wonderful. Who do you attribute to creation if you don't believe in God? I mean, call him God, Jehovah, whatever you want to call it. What do you attribute it to? Maybe a scientific factor or whatever. But regardless, everyone has to rely on faith, even if it's science. You have to believe in that. It has to be something, since no one was here. It has to be something that you believe in.
You want us to take that question first?
If you like.
Okay. Go ahead, David.
I think I can give you probably the clearest answer is that which creation story do you want to believe? Is it the stacks of turtles in the Hindu story, or is it the people crawling out of the hole of the earth in the Aztec stories, or is it the
giant cow licking the first people out of a block of ice from the Norse story?
There's so many stories of creation, and besides, I have a question for you. Were you there when creation occurred?
No, I wasn't. I said regardless of what you believe, you have to just believe. That's all I said. I didn't say you have to believe it was God. I just said that everyone, no matter what they believe, if it's a cow, if it's a rock, if it's a cabbage patch that you or something, you have to all break it down to believe. It doesn't matter. Before even the atom, no one had seen it. They just had to believe. It was just simple as that.
Okay.
I disagree with her.
Is that something you feel inside, that the world is so special and that it seems like something that has an intelligence or a loving spirit behind it? Do you feel like the world is a gift to all of us, or that it's too complicated and amazing for it to just have come into being by itself?
What do you mean come into being by itself?
I'm asking
you mean all of a sudden it just happened?
Is this something that you feel inside?
I think she's trying to ask.
No, I'm just
why
asking you. I'm not trying to explain what I feel. I'm very curious to know that if it's just like you sitting down in that chair, you have the belief that wood is strong enough to carry your weight. I'm just saying logically, who do you attribute to the power of being able to create your beautiful mind, your body, keep you breathing, every animal, every tree, and everything that exists now. Now, I know man took over afterwards and started doing whatever. And I'm not saying what I believe in. I'm
I can
just
answer your
curious to
question.
know what, or if that you don't have any faith in anything. So when you get sick and your parents are dying, you just say, "Oh well, that's what happened. See ya."
Well, okay. Now, boy, I'll try to answer this. I'm not going to. I'll probably not answer all of your points. Remind me of anything that you asked that you want clarification on. But the problem with the word faith is that faith has a number of definitions, and it covers. It can be applied to things anywhere from sitting in a chair, and even though you have people have vast experience that sitting in a chair works and you don't crash to the floor most of the time, people still understand that, boy, you might have a bad chair and you might sit down and it might break, because that's happened to most people too. So then there's just this tiny amount of uncertainty that's being covered by the word faith in that case. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have religious faith, which says, boy, there's not a scrap of evidence, of hard evidence of the existence of a God, but believe anyway. And that's a matter of degree. I mean, I have no objection to being accused of assuming that the chair I sit in is going to work, even though I can't be 100% certain of that, because if you don't accept some small amount of uncertainty and set that aside and say, well, I'm going to go ahead and live my life, you'd never do anything. I mean, nobody would ever sit in any chairs for the tiny chance that the chair they sat in might not work.
Absolutely. And what about the tiny chance?
Ma'am, please.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So that kind of faith is okay. That kind of faith you pretty much have to have. Atheists prefer not to use the word faith for that because it causes confusion, because Christians who are used to using the word faith to explain the way they go about believing in a God, for whose existence they have no evidence whatsoever, that confuses the issue, and Christians like yourself will equate the huge leap of faith that it takes to believe in God with the tiny leap of faith it takes to believe that a chair is going to work, okay? So that's the difference. We don't take things on faith in the sense that you mean it when you say you have faith in God. We take things on faith only in the sense that if we have if we feel that there is a solid, high probability that a certain thing is true, we'll trust that.
Okay, no, I didn't ask that question.
Okay.
I asked, and faith, that's just a relative term as far as I'm concerned, because you can call a tree a banana. It's just whoever decided on what to call what first. I'm saying, I'm just asking you, who do you attribute? That's all I'm saying. Are you saying no one did it and it's just something that happened? I'm just curious to know.
That's kind of an unfair question. That's like, have you stopped beating your dog assumes that you're beating your dog. It's, who do you think is responsible for the universe? Our answer is, we don't think somebody, a who, is responsible for the universe.
Right. Who do you, what? What do you attribute to this?
First cause is unknown. First cause, after death, and the existence of God are unprovable physically and theoretically.
No, I didn't ask you to prove God. I asked you, who do you attribute it to?
First cause, after death, and God are unprovable theorems. Therefore, leave them open to debate until the proper method to prove them exist or to verify their existence. I don't worry about it.
No, I'm not worried about it either, but you're concerned enough to have a show, and you ask folks to call in and ask questions, and my question is, that sounds like an agnostic, not an atheist, when you said you don't know. Just like you said, there's just that little glimmer of, I don't know, you don't want to call it faith or trust or whatever, that you have to sit on this chair. My second question, and I'll let you go because you could debate that forever, is, won't it be a trip if you find out when you die there is a God?
Okay.
The old Turner Burn
and we'll
and I'm not saying burn in hell, because see, all those things are man's interjections about what heaven or hell or whatever it is.
Okay.
I'm just talking about, generally speaking, what do you do when someone is sick or ill or What do you do? And like you said, it might be man's way of a little bit of a comfort, of a little bit of a blanket, Linus blanket, that since he doesn't know where to go when he's sick or he doesn't know what to do at certain times, the only thing that keeps him kind of going is that there's somebody that could possibly help him out. It might just be a comfort thing that man created because he knew he wasn't in control of everything. So he felt like, my God, I mean, I know how you all say you think, but when I say to myself, if I thought there was no one greater than me, it's a sad situation because out here in this world, there's so many people that have so many steadfast ideas, like there's people that don't like black folks, people that don't like white folks, for whatever reasons. And if you didn't have something, and I think that's what church is all about, whether you believe all these different little religions or all these different little guys. It's just people trying to find some reason and something for comfort.
Okay.
It's basically
well,
that.
We'll let you go and respond to that. Thanks for calling. I wanted to respond to the two things. First, why have the show? She didn't actually ask that, but just to clarify, this show is here to let other atheists know that they're not alone, because atheists tend to be isolated and afraid to speak out on what they believe. And this is just to let atheists know that there are some of us, and we meet every Sunday at the Hot Jumbo Bagelry at the corner of 5th and Lavaca. And the second thing is that there is a movement in this country to attempt to move Christianity more into our government, and that is the topic of today's show, the separation of church and state. And one of the important things for Americans to remember is that just because the vast majority of Americans are Christians doesn't mean they all are. And if our government starts picking Christianity and saying this is the officially sanctioned religion, that treads all over the rights of all non-Christians in America. That includes atheists, Buddhists, Hindus, Wiccans, Raelians, any religious group that exists other than Christians. So that's why we do the show. The second question she asked was, what if? Well, if it turns out that there's a God and he yells at me for not believing in him, I'm going to turn to that God defiantly for all the good it'll do me, because he's cosmically powerful and can fry me in hell forever. I'm going to turn to that God and say, screw you, buddy, because I'm a thinking being. If that God exists, he made me this way, and for him to turn around and punish me for using the intellectual faculties he gave me makes him a tyrant, and I couldn't possibly follow a being like that in good conscience. If it turns out that there's a God and he says, good job there using your brain, turns out you were wrong, but hey, come on in, well, that's a God that I could have some respect for. But it doesn't appear to be evidence that there was actually either one of those kinds of gods. You guys have anything to add?
Well, an idea being beautiful, an idea being profound, is not a good enough reason to believe it.
Yeah.
That's wishful thinking. That's my big bugaboo, my nemesis.
And there was the other issue of what do you do with sick and dying people? And
I can answer that one.
Go ahead.
What do you do with sick and dying? Well, last night I was in the emergency room because I've got an infection in my heel, and the doctor lanced the infection, removed a little piece of metal they had slid up into my heel. The doctor pulled it out, and then she turned around and said, bend over. Good old antibiotics. And I got a box of pills about that deep. And I went home, and my wife, who's out of town, I called her and said, honey, I got a needle stuck in my butt last night. And I had to sit, and we talked for a few minutes and talked to some friends, and then I went to bed and came here this morning. Got up at 6 o'clock to drive down here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason we can do these things is we got over these superstitions that we inherited from religion. And people tend to forget that before we had medical science, we were pretty much, flailing around at random. I mean, we're lucky that some folk remedies happened to be effective, but that's about all we had for medical science. And we had to get over things like, the idea that bleeding people was an effective cure, or the idea that praying for people was an effective cure, or the idea that washing your instruments was pointless because, oh, there's no such thing as little microbes. That theory is false because we all know that it's evil spirits that give people diseases. We had to get past all of that stuff. And medical science, what actually helps sick people, has constantly been in a battle to get past superstition. What's that?
This is an example of it. The information is the most valid thing in the world. And these books, they're not available through general press. We have to get these through a couple of order places. And they had to put these books on CDs because you can't print them anymore because they're not printed. Such as A.D. White's book, The History of the Warfare with Science and Theology, with Science with Theology. Well, that covers how science has constantly been in a battle to simply give basic medicinal information, sanitation, inoculations, etc. And this information is not available to the general public because of the hostility in the press.
Yeah. I'd also, oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, medical care needs support. It's not coming fast enough, at least not fast enough for our generation. My great aunt is in her last days. She's dying of Alzheimer's, and I had to relate this to my mother. My mother said, "I'll pray for her," and I said, "Could you please consider sending a donation to the Alzheimer's Foundation? We're this close to unraveling why this is happening." And she said, "Well, I can't make the donation, but I can pray." That's what's wonderful about prayer is anybody can pray and it's free. And I said, how about you do what I did, because I didn't have the money at the time to send a donation. Why don't you ask other people to send a donation? And if they can't send a donation, they can ask other people to.
Right. Yeah.
We're so close on these diseases, but we have a sort of a perspective that either, oh, there's nothing we could possibly do about it, or, well, if we pray, it will go away.
Yeah. And we got a bunch of callers lined up, and we'll get to you in a second. But one last thing on the subject of sick people. We haven't talked about dying people, and I just want to give my perspective on this. The last thing that I would want to have happen to me on my deathbed is for me to abandon my rational faculties and go ahead and believe in God just for a last few moments of personal gratification. That to me seems like a terrible way to end my life. And the last thing I would want to leave to my loved ones on my deathbed is the belief, me presenting them with the belief that I think that I have a soul that's going to go on to some afterlife and be happy for eternity. Why would I want to leave this world passing on that superstition to my loved ones? I think that the best, most respectful way that you can treat other human beings is level with them. And sometimes that's painful, but yeah, I think it's better than treating them like babies. So let's go on to the next call. We have Ed online. Wait a minute. Did I release the other line yet? Apparently somebody else did. We have Ed on one. Ed?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Good one, Jeff.
Thank you.
I was calling in regards to the chair.
Yeah.
Was she trying to say that you sit in the chair because you believe it'll hold you, or?
Yeah, she was equating. Off camera, we had somebody with a chair problem.
The power of my word.
Yeah, she was basically trying to equate a teeny little bit of faith, like you need to sit in a chair without worrying that it's going to collapse, with the huge amount of faith that you need to believe in God. And, that's like saying, well, a little bit of sugar is okay, so a whole lot of sugar is just as okay, and that doesn't follow.
Yeah, I think a lot of that would depend on the chair. I mean,
Sure.
If the chair was, really crappy and it was the only place to sit, I'd have to have a lot of faith to believe that it was going to hold me,
Yep.
So,
but what
as
you
far
would
as
do then,
equating that with believing in God, I just don't understand.
but what would you do if you're confronted with okay, you walk into a room, there's one chair, and you look at it, and it really looks like it's not going to hold you. Do you sit in it?
No.
That's exactly our response to God.
Exactly, and so that's logic. You know, I use logic as a tool that has nothing to do with faith in a deity. You know, that's bizarre to me. But anyway, I think you guys are doing a great job, and I didn't catch the names of the other two people. Are y'all gonna?
This is Manda, and this is my wife, Manda.
Oh,
and
cool.
This is our guest, David Bagley.
Great. Well, glad to see y'all out there.
I think what
Thanks
Joe
for
was
calling.
talking about was a reasonable expectation versus a unreasonable fate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just a difference in the amount of trust or experiential faith that you need. It's also a difference in attitude. With God, you're constantly told, don't question. But if you had a little kid and he asked you, can I sit in this chair or will it fall over? If he had, you might encourage him, well, sit in the chair, or can you think of a way to find out if this chair will hold you without hurting yourself?
Yeah.
It's the attitude that's different, not just the amount of faith.
How would you react to a person who, you know, you're standing in a room with a chair that really looks like it's going to fall down, and that person says, no, go ahead, just believe that it's going to hold you? You say, well, you're nuts. Let's go to Bill on 4. Bill?
Hello.
Morning, Bill.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay. Getting to your main topic, separation of church and state.
Yeah.
What I want to know is all these guys telling us that the Ten Commandments should be in the classroom. How many of them have it up on every wall in their house?
I don't know.
I would.
Do we have any Christians out there that want to answer that? They can go right ahead. I'm sure they'll all tell you they've got Bibles with the
No.
Ten Commandments listed in them.
I want the Ten Commandments on the wall in every room of their house.
Okay.
Before they even begin to make the proposition of putting it in the school where my children have to attend.
Yeah. Well.
Number 2. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I don't like playing the hypocrisy game where, you know, if somebody says something is important and they don't go overboard with it, then they're being hypocrites. I mean, they can believe that the Ten Commandments are important enough to post in public places without having the Ten Commandments plastered all over their own house, and then that's not hypocrisy. But I just want to know which set of Ten Commandments and why, you know, they think it's okay for the government. If it's the one that everybody usually thinks of, why do they think it's okay for our government to say, if you're not a Christian, you're breaking one of the 10 most important moral laws?
Well, which brings up, they always say, what's wrong with having up thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal? I say, hey, I got no problem with that, but what's his deal about having no other gods before this one God? What about all the people that believe in multiple gods?
Right. What about, you know, there's...
Or keeping the Sabbath holy.
Right. Or images, you know. Buddhists have them, those Buddha statues.
And the images one, and not having idol worship and whatever, that kind of hits at the Catholics. I don't know why the Catholics aren't upset with that. Don't they have all sorts of idols and icons that were prohibited in the original 10? Anyway, that's a whole theological matter. But
well, the Catholics have their own version of the Ten
Commandments.
I
wanted to mention that. They took out the second commandment, and they bumped up all the other ones, and they stretched out the ninth commandment into the 10th.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what Catholics did?
They don't have idol worship in their Ten Commandments.
And you know, depending on which version of the Ten Commandments you're talking about and which translation of it, the prohibition against images could easily be extended to include, like, pictures of angels, you know? Having an angel on top of your Christmas tree. I mean, things that all Christians do, way more than just Catholics. All Christians have, like, little pictures of angels all over the place.
Right. Now,
I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority, I think, is probably safe.
And as far as the faith thing, I don't catch you every week, but I've caught a couple. And Jeff, your talk on extraordinary claims.
Yeah.
Take extraordinary evidence. Well, a chair, and if you've seen 3 or 4 people who weigh more than you sitting in that chair, you don't need extraordinary proof to go ahead and sit in that chair.
Yeah.
To buy into the Christian model of creationism requires way more incredible facts and so on than are presently available.
Yeah. I wrote an essay, which I read here on the show, before I was even co-host, just as a guest. and the essay is called Religious Faith is the Glorification of Ignorance, because the way that Christians, religious people in general, approach the idea of faith is, boy, if you have to make a huge leap to believe this, that's good. That's like a special, good, wonderful thing you can do, and it's not. If you're forced to sit in that rickety chair, that's not a wonderful, good thing. That's a distasteful chore that you should try to avoid at every opportunity.
All right.
Yeah,
well, thank you for bringing the extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. I was raised with somebody telling me on a daily basis things like Noah's Ark and the creation story. I never thought of them as extraordinary because I heard them every day. So it's not illogical.
Repetition thing.
Yeah, it's not illogical to compare the idea of God to whether or not a chair will break. It's not illogical, but I think the better perspective is that the idea of God really is an amazing claim.
Right, and the other thing is that when the reliance is based on the word of the Bible, and there are so many dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of factual and scientific errors in that book, it would seem that the logical thing is to really question anything in there. Not saying all things in there, but just because it's in there, with all the wrong things are in there, that's certainly no argument. Now, here's a good one for you.
Okay.
All right. What about putting up in schools or in government the golden rule? Would you be against that?
It depends how it's formulated. There's problems with that too. I mean, most times you see the golden rule written out, it can easily be interpreted by Christians. Oh, I would want other people to bring belief in Christianity to me, so I'm not violating the golden rule if I go out and proselytize to other people. You know, there are problems with that, the way it's usually phrased.
Okay, and this is not a solution that I am proposing. Yeah. But what if you had the Christian translation, the Jewish translation, the Hindu translation, the Buddhist translation, since it appears in all these? Now, obviously, the first point is that you'd be leaving somebody out. But you'd still be opposed of the golden rule in schools.
In general, I mean, I don't think that's the way to teach morals to kids, is with these rules that are solid. I mean, as a principle, as a general principle, it's pretty good. But I wouldn't want to teach one principle in a vacuum. I would want to, if you say, the golden rule is, I think, too general.
Okay. Let me ask you this then.
Okay.
The state schools, should they teach any morality?
I think they should teach ethics. And to show you how backwards we are in this country about ethics, you might, if you have a computer, look up rights or ethics on the web, or talk to people around you and say, what exactly are ethics? I did some research on this last night. I'm trying to educate myself as to how people come up with sets of ideas to live by. My problem with the golden rule is, as a rule, there are many things that would come into conflict with it. If you made it a principle...
Forget the golden rule. Now you're talking about ethics. Yeah. Whose ethics?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is I would accept it. I would accept many things as principles. And when you talk about ethics, there are many ways to derive lists of them, many ways to prioritize them. I think that ultimately every individual has to have their own set of priorities. Yeah, I think that laws can only go so far.
To try to respond directly, do you want to take this?
Yeah. As far as what you're saying, robbing, raping, killing, pillaging are pretty much universal. It's also societal, because in some cases it's okay to pillage a next door neighbor because they're a different religion or whatever, according to whatever group you believe in. But the basic ideas of robbing, raping, killing, and pillaging are not religious. They are simple survival techniques of our species. And we can teach those as ethical conduct without any problem. And the other thing you mentioned was about the Ten Commandments or other things. Well, the Texas State Constitution expands even more broadly on that than anything else. It says, no man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or maintain any ministry against the consent No human authority ought in any case whatever to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion, and no preference shall ever be given by law to any religious society or mode of worship. Yeah. If that's not a, if that doesn't answer some of the questions about church-state separation in Texas, I don't know what does.
To try to answer your question directly, what schools, schools ought to be pitching in and trying to help make ethical citizens.
Public schools, state-funded schools.
Public schools, sure. Yeah. Of course, we want to make good citizens. I mean, they used to have a thing called like civics.
So you believe
that was all about that. No, let me answer.
In state indoctrination centers, then.
Just wait. There are, as Manda pointed out, all kinds of ways of coming up with ethical systems other than religion. And what we need is we need to teach kids to think about ethics and show them all of the different systems. I wouldn't even necessarily mind if we showed them the theistic ones in school, as long as it's part of an overview of all the different ethical systems, and encourage kids to be decent to each other. That's perfectly okay. But what we can't do is take something like the Ten Commandments, some particular religion's particular set of rules that include a rule that you gotta be a Christian to be a good person, and post that as if the government was saying that's the ultimate set of rules. That's what we can't do.
All right, well, I'm not sure. That was very well stated. I'm not sure I agree. If you haven't figured out, I'm a libertarian.
Yeah.
And the idea of the state compelling ideas into children at the point of a gun, by the way. At the threat of incarceration and the point of a gun.
Most non-theistic ethical systems come down to competing principles, and so that you're not talking about indoctrination. You're talking about empowering kids with a way of looking at things that allows them to decide what's best to do in each situation by weighing competing principles against one another.
And you do see that as a legitimate function of
I see that as legitimate.
Okay, well, we'll have to disagree on that one.
Okay, fair enough.
Isn't there a big difference? Isn't there a big difference between teaching civil conduct, which means how to behave? You don't block people's driveways. You don't steal someone's property. I don't walk up to you and hit you in the face and take your wallet. I mean, there's a difference between teaching ethical civil conduct and between teaching religious principles. I mean, Europeans very much have different religious philosophies, and in general don't kill one another over them, and live fairly civilly in very small areas with large populations.
Right. I'm not an anarchist, so I believe in civil laws and civil remedies.
So do you think all kids should get these from their parents?
Their parents or a private school that the parents choose.
Okay.
Versus state funding and state-mandated curricula.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I hear you.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks for calling.
May I throw something out there?
Go ahead, Arlo.
It seems to me if I just wanted a quick comment. It seems to me that if we would make it, show children that it's okay to think in the first place, they could handle situational ethics.
Yeah. I agree.
Hey, Joe.
I gotta get him on the air.
Joe
Zamecki.
Good morning.
Morning, Joe.
How you doing?
We got no Ray today.
Oh, that's right.
He's taking his month off.
Well, it's good to talk to y'all, Jeff and Amanda and David.
Thank you. Folks, Joe is the former co-host of this show, and now in New Jersey working with American Atheists.
Yep. Well, I just had a couple little things to talk about. Speaking of separation of church and state, the Religious Liberty Protection Act is currently in the House, actually passed the House Judiciary Committee and was passed by the House and is going to the Senate soon, in fact, in the next week or so. And this is the new clone version, the newly named version of the Religious Freedom Amendment, which is also the Religious Liberty. There's a whole bunch of them.
Hasn't that?
RFRA.
Is this like a whole new one?
Yes.
Yeah,
Boy, they're just going to keep pounding on that till they get one through, aren't they?
Yes. They're all basically the same with a different name, and they're full of exemptions for churches and other religious organizations. They can be exempted from certain things like the anti-discrimination laws. And, well, this one is pretty well supported. And as usual, the committee meetings that are happening in the Congress where they're considering this, they're inviting speakers on behalf of, on support of this, and a whole lot of them, mostly leaders of major churches. and then only a handful, and this time only one person, is allowed to speak in opposition during these committee meetings. I believe her name is Marcy Hamilton, and she was the attorney in Bernie versus Flores in Bernie, Texas. Anyway, this is coming dangerously close to a T, and they might actually pass this in the next couple of weeks, pass through the Senate.
This is in the House right now?
Yes.
Well, it just passed the House.
It has passed the House.
After going through the House Judiciary Committee. I'll just read, this is off the AA site. The House Judiciary Committee approved the controversial Religious Liberty Protection Act in a poorly attended markup session that included a questionable vote and amendments that were quickly rejected. Over in the Senate, the Judiciary Committee conducted a hearing, and American Atheist President Ellen Johnson presented hundreds of letters of opposition that we actually got people to sign off our website. It's a good idea because this is something that needed to happen really fast. They don't normally give the opposition very much notice when these hearings come up and when they're invited to come and speak in opposition. Marcy Hamilton got very little time, and so she contacted us, and we're trying to get the word out to everybody because the media doesn't seem to want to talk about it. But the RLPA is very close to being passed in the Senate. So this is something that all non-believers and even Christians and all other kind of religious people should be aware of. This is something that would give special rights to religious groups and could overturn some of the most basic court cases regarding prayer in school and faith healing and other ideas. One comes to mind in Florida. The Florida version of the RLPA, the state version, was recently talked about in a court case involving Scientology, where a woman named Lisa McPherson died at the hands of Scientologists while they were on kind of a retreat, which was a case of faith healing because she could have been saved if they had taken her to our hospital. And this was one case where they stood up and said, well, the RLPA, the state version, protects us in this matter. So it's not neglect, and it's not manslaughter, and it's not abandonment. It's religious exercise.
Right. And our religious exercise is we lock people in rooms and let them die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to say something about Lisa McPherson, to be honest.
Okay.
If you are dumb enough to join a group like that, and then
do you know the background of that story, though?
Well,
she had fled.
Well,
and they went and got her and brought her back.
But
she tried to leave.
If she had been in that group and staying in that group, and had voluntarily been there to follow that philosophy, and that philosophy killed her, we have to allow for people's stupidity. If it's the other thing, and she's not in that group, then they shouldn't be covered.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like I mean, that there's a real serious ethical question there about, you know, do we allow people to use their religious beliefs to let horrendous things happen? You know, if you have Christian scientists who refuse to give their child medicine because they think that you know medicine is evil and they have to leave it up to God, at some point I think the rest of society has a legitimate interest in stepping in and saying no, you're just being goofy.
Well, there's a difference between an adult and a child. If an adult chooses to do something, as long as that adult has the right to refuse medical treatment, an adult has the right to do a dozen things.
Yeah. We
have the right as a society to intercede in behalf of people who are dependent on others, whether it's an adult or a child. So there's two competing ideas which are very clearly put together in law already.
Okay, interesting. Anything else, Joe?
Well, yeah, just real quickly about the Ten Commandments deal now.
Yeah.
This is something else that's quite obvious. And by the way, the RLPA would protect all the Ten Commandments ideas in public schools. We put out a little press release on this with just very short complaints because there's so many of them that you could raise against the Ten Commandments. One of them is the first three commandments are a prohibition against the free exercise of religion in direct opposition to the First Amendment.
Right.
Number two, thou shalt not kill is, well, except for the police, the military, and the criminal justice system. Number three, the commandment to keep the Sabbath day holy also includes the admonition to grant one's slaves a day off. Did y'all know that? This was originally an idea to give your slaves a day off.
It would depend on what version of the Ten Commandments you're talking about, because I know there's several.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, but there are lots of parts to those commandments that the government will not want kids to see in public school, especially condoning slavery. So, anyway, I just think everybody ought to contact their representative. I'm not telling what to do, but I've already written a letter, and I think it's important that the Congress and other representatives understand there are non-believers who have civil rights.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Thanks. I'll call next week.
All right, Joe.
Have a good day then.
You too. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
There's not much news. Let's just go to more callers. We got Alan on too. Alan, hello.
Hi. I believe in miracles.
Goodbye.
Still?
And then we have, who's next? Mike on one. Mike on one. Morning, Mike.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. It's the first time I've tuned into your show, and
okay.
I must say, so far I've really enjoyed it. It's been very enlightening. I didn't know there was an organization such as this in Austin, and I'm fairly new to the area. But so far, you've spoken of some very compelling subjects, and many of the things that I agree with. Nothing to pinpoint, but I work as a nurse in one of the hospitals here in Austin, and it's at times for me it's distressing. It's nothing that overtakes me or ruins my day, but it's very distressing to me when I see people dying, and it's pretty much a weekly thing, and to see that and I've even had some of my own families that has passed away in recent years that where some of the the rest of my family has tried to maintain them and keep them on life support and to do that type of thing, and it's something that really for me is not a question. I know for myself that if I was in that position, I would not want to be sustained on life support unless there was hope that I could regain a normal life. That's of course that's I think anyone would go along with that, but many of those types of beliefs are religious based, and sometimes I really have a problem with that.
Now, you're talking about the belief that we ought to keep people on life support is religious based?
Well, I'm in favor of keeping people on life support if there's hope,
right?
For them to regain a normal or close to normal life.
Yeah.
And if it's something that, and of course I'm sure I would get battered for that.
Well, that's a tough question, but I agree with you. I think that some of the more extreme stances on that have a religious basis. Yeah.
I think it goes back many years, and it's much further than you and me put together, I'm sure. And it's something that has always been on my mind. I had an aunt that died last year. And this was up north, up in the Midwestern area, and the rest of my family that was sitting with her had her on every kind of life support you could name. I mean, it was just not to go into any detail, but it was just so unnecessary. And I was one of the few nephews that went up there to see her that had any kind of medical experience of any type. And when I spoke with the rest of the family about, they were kind of looking to me to understand how badly she really was and how far along she was. And I told them, I'm sort of, I don't try to shock people or try to, I don't want to hurt anybody, but I thought it was important, especially when she was so close to death, to let them know that there's really. I'm not God and I'm not anything special, but I've seen enough of it to know that she was on her way out, and it was very sad. She was one of my favorite relatives in it, and I loved her very much.
So I'm just curious. Are you an atheist yourself, or no?
Well, I'm not a Christian.
Okay.
That doesn't answer your question.
No, it doesn't. There are all kinds of religions out there.
I'm very agnostic in so many things, and I'm very ignorant about a lot of things, but my views are very agnostic. To put a label on myself as an atheist, I don't know, but I would certainly, I guess, being agnostic, as I've openly admitted to many people, I don't advertise it, but to admit that is something that goes back many years. I've just never really labeled myself as an atheist, but I do very much. I don't think you have to be an atheist or you have to be anything, Christian or a heathen or whatever to agree with with many or all of the views of a certain group. And it just so happens that when I was tuning into you this morning, there were so many things that you were saying that, and your wife too, and I'm sorry, what is the gentleman next to you?
David.
many of those views I agree with, and so maybe I'm sort of a fledgling when it comes to this type of thing.
We're always curious. This show is here to try to reach out to atheists out there and let you know that those of you who are atheists know that you're not alone. We generally define atheist as anybody who does not have an active belief in God. So that includes agnostics, in our opinion, or most agnostics. You could also have religious agnostics who believe in God but say that, but admit that they can't know for sure.
Yeah.
They just believe.
Right.
So if you're an agnostic who does not happen to believe in God, then we consider you one of us, and we'd like to invite you down to the bagel shop. We meet every Sunday, except the first Sunday of the month, where we have our lecture series at the Hot Jumbo Bagelry at the corner of 5th and Lavaca.
5th and Lavaca. I'd like that.
If you're interested, pardon me?
Yes.
Right after the show.
I'd really like to do that.
If you'd like to meet other people who are reasonably like-minded, come on down.
Yeah, I've always approached the subject from this arena from a fact-based position. And I've never allowed, in fact, you had touched on earlier about it being so easy, or I think you mentioned Dick Cavett. I think you said he felt that it was so easy, and he felt that it did him no honor, or to paraphrase what you were saying, for him to just simply accept that quickly, any type of religious belief. And I've always felt like that's an easy way out.
Yeah.
That's just mean.
There goes my tea. Oh, sorry about that.
I just feel that way, and I feel like it's far harder. I have a lot of friends who are Christian. Oh, there we go. I think that was my chair. I think there's a lot of friends I have that are Christian, and some who claim to be Christian, and whatever. Yeah. And I certainly don't. Yep, there it is. You don't see me, though.
Is that chair half empty or half full? It's completely empty.
Sounds like I'm getting the hook here.
Somebody's having
well,
fun
thanks very much for calling.
Well, I appreciate it.
We're going to move on. We hope to see you down at the shop.
Thank you very much.
Well, maybe one of the things to say about death that's so interesting is that we as a society in the 1900s, up to the early 1900s, we have to remember that most people died at home and there was a broad spectrum of death across the whole lifespan. People died as children, people died in middle age, people died in elderly age, but people were more familiar with death because it was more common. And then from around the 1920s and 30s, with the advent of inoculations and sanitation and various other things, death has taken a whole different stand in our society. From the large death across the spectrum, it has all of a sudden gone boop,
right,
to the old end, to the ages, where now we have more people living longer. So now our science...
And fewer deaths at younger ages, so they're more shocking.
And we have chronic diseases and diseases that weren't common before, and Alzheimer's that wasn't common before, and other things that now we have a whole different experience with the end of life. And that's where his problem and other people's problem is our science and our ethics haven't caught up with the reality that we've changed society.
Yeah. Let's go to another caller. We've got Robert on 4. Hello?
Hey, Robert.
Hello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Christian, and I enjoy listening to your program on Sunday mornings before I go to church. Interesting topics arise. And I was wondering if anyone on your panel there knew that on the northwest corner of the grounds of the state capitol of Texas stands etched in granite the Ten Commandments.
David here knew that.
You did know that.
Well, if there's...
And then what is your comment on that? I find that very interesting.
Okay.
Well, there's two things in the northwest corner of the state capitol. The first is the racist Jesus put there by the Fraternal Order of Eagles, which has been sitting there since about early 1960s. It was put there because they wanted to. This organization put it up there, and somehow no one's ever caught up the fact that the Fraternal Order of Eagles is basically similar to the KKK. And they had one black person as a member. And as far as the Ten Commandments goes, well, no one's ever really taken it to a battle, but it should not be put there unless you have all the other things there. Do you have Buddha there? The tenets of Buddha? Do you have the code of conduct for anybody else? No, it shouldn't be there.
Do you happen to know which version of the Ten Commandments it is, sir?
No, I don't. It'd be good to have a photograph of it that would have, you know, the copy of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I just happened to be riding by there one day on a bicycle, and I looked at it and I said, I was amazed myself, being a Christian, and riding by and saying, what is this doing on the grounds of the state capital of this state? You know, I consider myself to be a devout Christian, but I also understand and appreciate other people's viewpoints, and you know, that other people have a reasonable right to disagree or to agree with these different topics that arise.
So if we sent around a petition saying get that off the lawn of the state capitol, would you sign it?
Would I sign it?
Yeah. Not that we have any such petition at the moment.
That is a tough question, but I would say this. I would say, would the atheist community find enough support within the city of Austin or the state of Texas among themselves to have them removed?
You mean, are there enough just atheists to get anything done?
As a challenge to y'all, or to maybe to the American Civil Liberties Union or whoever. Yeah. You know, I just find it interesting that it's there and that it hasn't been challenged.
Are you trying to start a
My
fight?
personal opinion is I don't have a problem with it. But I'm sure, looking at it from a perspective of open-minded and the belief that other people have a right to have their own beliefs, that it has not been challenged.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring it up at our next board meeting.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
We'll see what happens. Good luck to y'all, and God bless.
I'm kind of glad that we don't get upset about things like that, because we're not here to make people unhappy and say, ooh, you put that religious thing there, we're going to stop that. We're not trying to be confrontational. We just happen to be at a time and place when there's a very heavy religious influence creeping into government, and we don't want that. I mean, the caller asked, would we get enough support? Well, for a long time we've been working on, there have been members of our group trying to get the mandatory swear to God in the the
state constitution.
In the state constitution, to be in office, you have to take an oath, and you have to swear before God, and that's considered, now they call it for symbolic purposes, ritual purposes.
There's actually an answer to that. In O'Hare v. White, which was a case, one of the few cases they got at, which actually won something in the state of Texas, the God requirement was removed from the state constitution.
Now, my understanding is that it was still in the Constitution, but it isn't enforced.
They've agreed to that it should be removed, but neither the state legislature nor Westlaw will do what they've agreed to do.
Yeah.
And then there is the case of Torcaso v. Watkins, in which an ethical culturist, Torcaso, took the case up, and now they cannot require a God oath. So the first atheist that wins a state office and then stands up and says, I'm going to sue you, they're going to have to back down and remove it. So it's either going to happen either by the legislature, or finally when someone who stands up and says, I've won a state office, and they're going to say, well, I'm not going to swear to God, and they're going to have to put them in the office.
Yeah, what are the odds of getting an atheist into office?
We never know.
Well, I guess we'll have to start trying to do that at some point.
Well, look, they got a homosexual in the state legislature.
Yeah.
Declared homosexual. It's only a matter
of
time.
Well, the homosexuals have already had their big cultural movement.
Yeah.
Us atheists haven't had ours yet,
Yes.
and we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have another call. Rita
Three.
on 3. Morning, Rita.
Good morning. Yes, I just tuned up on this program. And my husband had mentioned about there's a community of atheists in Austin. I just moved in Austin for the past five months. And I just want to know what's your definition for that etiquette in compared to morality.
Ethics compared to morality.
Etiquette. Amanda said etiquette. She mentioned a lot about etiquette. How do you define etiquette in compared to morality?
Yeah, I think she used the word ethics. She meant the word ethics.
Etiquette,
I meant the word ethics.
Ethics or
ethics.
How do you define ethics into compared to morality?
Your morality is something you got from your religion, usually. It isn't necessarily anything that you've questioned. And your ethics are what you decide to do to live with other people. That's the basis of ethics, is how do we cooperate, how do we maintain peace. Your morality may say that peace and cooperation aren't important or aren't as important as believing in God, but the one thing that all people who follow an ethical existence or try to define their ethics have in common is it is a system to live with other people.
So ethics is the way you behave.
Your morality can be a way you behave.
It's like how you behave, whether you are...
Oh, something happened. We lost... Are you still there, ma'am? We lost our caller.
Oh, could you please call back? Or
yeah, well, why don't you just try to finish the question? Huh?
Yeah.
Pick up 3?
Yeah.
Hello?
Looks like
hello? Who do we got on 3?
Tell her to call back.
We got nothing on 3.
Okay. Call back.
Yeah, call back, ma'am. Amanda, go ahead and... Huh?
Well, morality is actually an established set, is a formally established set of mores within a society. Now, they can be religious or non-religious, but in our society, we generally refer to them as religious mores that are handed down. Ethics are generally, like you said, concerning people's behavior, and it can be an ethical action based on a religious more, or it can be a non-religious more. But ethics are more experientially based, and I think that's where you were leading. They're more experientially based and chosen.
Right. Does anybody have any insights? Call in. Call in and tell us.
Let's take another call. We got Joe on 2. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, Joe.
Morning.
Morning.
There's something I saw earlier on this show that kind of is kind of disturbing.
Okay.
The War on Wiccans. I've been studying like fundamentalism for years.
There's that guy again.
Right. What I don't understand is why are they? Why
if you get a good look at his face, he's creepy looking. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It shouldn't surprise me, but it's disturbing because why is there a war on Wiccans? Because if fundamentalist Baptists respect the Constitution of freedom of religion, why are they declaring war on Wiccans? I guess this goes back to the military thing.
Okay. David's going to answer your question, and you're probably going to be our last caller because we just noticed we got 2 minutes left.
I live about 7 miles from his church. I have sat and talked with this man. He specifically states that he believes that this is a Christian country established under Christian principles. He's one of the David Barton types, or the fundamentalist Christian types that believe in a theocracy of the USA being a Christian Protestant theocracy. And he thinks his 123 verses in the Bible that says that Christians should damn witches. He specifically states that we should have laws against witches, to me, and that it's okay to deal with them directly, including, if necessary, killing them.
I think that when you have a religious basis for your beliefs, you have no reason to disbelieve, and maybe he thinks that Wiccans are using their abilities, their mystical talents, their insights against Christianity. I think it's based on fear.
Well, in fact, they are. I mean, it was in the newspaper that they had this big ritual of tolerance, you know, where they were burning herbs for the sake of affecting the opinion of Representative George Barr, or Bob Barr, sorry, of Georgia. So that's all the time we have. Bye, everybody. I want to, again, invite all you atheists out there down to the bagel shop, corner of 5th and Lavaca, right after the show. And thanks for watching. Arlo, we got some closing music? That's it?
Do the chair set.
All right, do the chair.
Sit down then. Go ahead.
Okay.
We're going to do an experiment. We don't have him on camera. Oh well.
They're putting my music up there. I didn't have it ready. I didn't know you guys are going to show that.
Okay.
Maybe next time.
We don't have the music. By
Tune in next time for that music.
Bye.
Channel 5. If you need some money, I wouldn't change that dial. But God got, haba, haba. I look at you and I see money. They'll take screaming and speaking in tongues and casting out demons. Foul, rotten, stinking devil, I'm going to beat you up, you devil. I'm going to cut you to pieces in the name of Jesus.
Okay, you've made your point. Now watch this.
Demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, rape, blasphemy, suicide, assassination, insanity, sex.
I will have trouble keeping my blood pressure under control, dear friends, tonight.
Like that man in the PTO club. If he is such an amazing healer, why can't he make his wife's chippy pop hairdo go down?
The first miracle that I ever observed was my little chicken.
It started growing, and now it's lost its tail. It's got 4 legs, and it jumps around and just gobbles up little pieces of chicken. I mean, it just grabs those little pieces of chicken. Named that little frog Jimmy after my brother. So I'm endeavoring not to look shallow. Don't you laugh at me. I know what I'm talking about. And he that touches me puts his finger in the eye of God.
Viewers are still advised to keep their guard up, to be wary of televangelists who seem more interested in raising money than in spreading the gospel.
Gaze upon me, for I have heard the word of God. Hearken unto my words, for my words are the word of God. Fall to your knees. Now get up, get up. I'm a false prophet. That's just a sample of what I do.
Don't you edit up this stuff. I'll come after you. I got a lot of attorneys, and this church got a lot of money. So don't mess with us.
The future in your mind.
Let me ask you a question, okay? Do we beat you?
No.
No. Don't kid yourself. I'd like to a couple times. Maggie? Wow.
Neighbor, I hope you've enjoyed what you have witnessed today.
I like to chop the devil up, don't you? I'm going to ask every one of you to draw a picture of your hand.
I can do all things through Christ.
There's something wrong with me. I'm just really have it bad. Could I have some Milltown or Valium?
Nobody's trying to tell you that when life hands you a lemon, turn that lemon into lemonade.
Get you everything you need. You need to believe in here and just believe in me.
In your whole life, you just come up short, driving old dumpy cars that break down. I want you to know something. I've got faith for you to drive a brand new car. It may not be a Cadillac. It might be a Chevrolet. It might be a Toyota. It might be a Honda.
So you want me to drive a Honda?
No wonder our world is in such a mess.
There is a problem.
Few issues that anger and incite contempt in the American public more than a televangelist who says he's supporting homeless children in a foreign country and doesn't.
Why get so spiritual if there's no market for it?
Oh, yeah. What's big? He's no black and white world. So live in full color. Yeah, man.
We have total freedom of religion in this country, and anybody who feels called by God to be a minister can call himself that.
Jesus can save you. He can deliver you. He can set you free from your poverty spirit.
Also, Reverend Gene Scott was on TV late at night going, I'm now going to compare Jesus and Spider-Man.
There will be 50 people give $1,000. And do it right now, or I am finished.
If you want to turn the channel, go ahead, fool. Turn the channel.
Day one. Lick it and stick it. This will get the Red Sox into the World Series.
Just hold it. Just be cool. Just hang loose a second. Don't zap me.
This new age movement. You heard of this? It's one of those Shirley MacLaine I'm so spiritual deals where you put an Aunt Jemima scarf on your head and you wear rocks around your neck and you eat a lot of cheese broccoli. And then you give Shirley MacLaine $300 and she comes to your town and tells you how your higher self is going to start picking up satellite signals from Pluto. You'll just go to someplace in Colorado and flush out your colon. You know how they're always talking about that stuff, colon flushing? I wish they'd quit that. It's disgusting.
And you know, you have to really be educated on colon cleansers. I didn't know anything about colon. I didn't know anything about the colon 7 years ago.
But I want you to know that you have 5.5 feet of large intestine, that's your waist. And then you have 22 feet of small intestine, that's your digestive system. And all these years we've put trash in. I'm just as guilty as you. So what's going to happen? Trash comes out.
That is despicable.
I've looked for one verse in the Bible. I just can't seem to find it. One verse that said if you don't like them, kill them.
If you are offended by television evangelists being portrayed as duplicitous and money-grubbing, then please don't watch.
Okay, we're going to bring on Miss Duncanville now and introduce her. She's a delight. She's a veteran of 3 Miss Texas pageants, but the main thing is she loves the Lord Jesus Christ with all of her heart. She's totally committed to the Lord, and she's given her life to Him. She wants to be a gospel singer and have a television Christian talk show, and I know she's going to have it. So let's welcome, from Bowie, Texas, Susan McMurray, Miss Duncanville. Hello again, Susan.
Hello, Dan.
One more thing before we move on. What are you going to be doing this weekend?
Go back to what you're saying, you know, right?
What was I saying?
You were saying get out.
Get out.
Run for your life.
Get out.
He's so over the top, so unabashed, so blatantly insincere and downright evil that it's refreshing.
2/3 of our television is controlled by Jewish people, and thank God for that. They're good people. I love them. They're God's chosen people, okay? I love the Jewish people. You don't have to be black to make a vow. A $1,000 vow of faith, big deal. We got people on welfare that's got enough faith to make a $1,000 vow and paying it.
How many of you like silver and gold? Those of you that don't, you're in the wrong church.
You get one of them religious Bibles, they don't want to believe Galatians 3:13. They don't want to believe Deuteronomy 28. Oh, Bob, that's a holy book. Those are holy pages. You shouldn't have done that. There ain't nothing holy about that paper. Only thing holy is the $7 it costs to buy. Welcome to real Christianity. Welcome to real Christianity.
Lord, just make me lie down in the green. Oh, yes, Lord. Let me lie down in the green. I want to be in the green, Lord. Somebody says, why do you blow on people?
I don't know. Basically, what I do is I put on a show. I consider myself an entertainer first and a false prophet second.
And I don't appreciate preachers that get mixed up in adultery and every other type of sin that won't